Well, you certainly have to say one thing about Liberals. They absolutely take care of their own. Take, for instance, Chrystia Freeland. She has decided that she no longer wants to be an MP, and she would much rather have a nice appointment. And so that's exactly what she's getting. But others are also leaving Mark Carney's government. So what's going on? Hello, I'm Adrienne Batra. With me are Lilley and Lorrie Goldstein. So let's start with Chrystia Freeland. I know there had been some rumblings. You had reported some time ago, actually, Brian, that Chrystia Freeland was willing and ready and able to leave government. And now she's doing that, and she's going to be Canada's special envoy to Ukraine. This is the person that really started the domino effect and got Justin Trudeau out. So is she being rewarded now with this cushy appointment?
9 months to the day after she stuck the knife in Justin Trudeau with her resignation letter is when we find out that she's leaving as Carney's transportation minister, of which I'd heard some grumblings that she wasn't doing a good job and she wasn't interested. But yeah, I'd heard this back in 2023 that she wanted to leave. She was looking for the exits. So I wasn't surprised at all. But finding out that David Lametti, the former Justice Minister turned Carney's principal secretary, that he's leaving. That's interesting. Bill Blair he may go to the UN, by the way. Bill Blair apparently going to replace Ralph Goodale in London as our High Commissioner to the UK. We're replacing an affable, easy to get along with guy with a buddy who, as I put in my column, has the bedside manner of a drill sergeant with a bad temper. This makes no sense. Jonathan Wilkinson, another former cabinet minister that didn't get in, being shuffled off to Germany. And we don't know where Stephen Guilbeault's going, but don't expect Guilbeault to go anywhere until after October 19th. That's when his pension kicks in after 6 years of service.
Lorrie, it is interesting timing that there are a number of departures, some happening, some that we know of already. Others, we're speculating a little bit. Obviously, there's some of those MPs that are going to wait until their pension is vested. Boy, have we heard that before, Jagmeet Singh. But they're not going away empty-handed. They're many of them are likely going to get an appointment, as Brian has mentioned. They take care of each other. There's no question about that. I'm just wondering, though, why now? I mean, this is a brand new session. The new government is about to bring in what will likely be a devastating budget. We'll talk about that in a moment. But why now?
Well, I think they're sort of telegraphing it out. They're putting it out there. But I don't think they want any of these people to blow before they get their budget passed. They've got they're close to a majority, but they don't have a majority. They lose a few votes on that, then the Conservatives and Bloc. Now, I don't think anybody wants an election, but it makes them more vulnerable. So that's why you notice that Chrystia Freeland is half out the door. She's going to be the special envoy for Ukraine reconstruction. And in fairness, that to me, that's fair, given, her concern about what's going on, her fluency in the language. Those are good things. But she's staying as an MP until the next election. In terms of the others, I'd be surprised if they go immediately, because then their seats are gone. Now you have to have a by-election. Like, you really want to lose 2 seats before this budget is passed? But we'll have to see. In terms of it happening, this is a form of patronage. It serves Carney's interests in that he can now distinguish himself more. Whatever you think about the policies, in terms of the appearance, he can distinguish himself more from the Trudeau era and the Trudeau cabinet. And presumably he will find high-profile people to take over some of these ridings, which are the safest in the country. You could run a dog in some of these places and elect a Liberal. So it doesn't surprise me. It's not been confined to Liberals doing it. But it's, my old saying in politics is Liberal, Tory, same old story. This is what governments do. They look after those friends.
Brian, let's talk about David Lametti for a moment. It broke just late in the night that he has left or is leaving PMO. And there's some reporting and suggestion that he, again, former Justice Minister of Canada, now Principal Secretary, one of two Principal Secretaries, that him and another one in the PMO were kind of going after each other. I'm not sure if it was on policy, on principle, on sort of jockeying for position. What do you know about why is Lametti suddenly leaving?
Because Tom Pitfield smoked him. And I'll explain why that's a funny line to you in a moment. Two principal secretaries doesn't make sense. So principal secretary tends to look after policy, the politics of things. The chief of staff tends to look after day-to-day operations, the machinery of government, making sure that ministers' offices are properly staffed and functioning properly. And the principal secretary is supposed to be there to be like the guiding light for the boss in terms of direction they want to go, make sure that the political direction is there. If there are political problems in the way, to let the boss know. You can't have two of those guys. And there were two. I was speaking with a plugged-in Liberal up in Ottawa earlier this morning, and they said this drama between the two of them has been going on since the election campaign. They were both on the election campaign, and they never really were able to flesh out who was in charge of what. So they're fighting. They're fighting for power within the PMM. Now, a couple of weeks ago, there was this odd story about how Tom Pitfield, the other principal secretary, had represented Philip Morris Tobacco when he was in the private sector running his company, Data Sciences, and market analytics firm. And this gets leaked to the Globe and Mail. And suddenly Carney's been asked, well, is this acceptable that one of your top advisors was advising Big Tobacco? That story clearly came from who? David Lametti. That was an attempt by Lametti to harm Pitfield, in my view. And what happened? Pitfield smoked Lametti. He's sticking around. Lametti's on his way out the door. He can go live in that other luxury condo that we have in New York for the UN ambassador and replace Bob Ray, who, has done a good job on some things, has been crotchety of late, and has been horrible since October 7th.
Lorrie, does it say anything about Carney, his government? They're new, but they're not. What's old is new again. There's a lot of the retreads of the Trudeau era that are surrounding Mark Carney, but then there's some new faces as well. Is this a good thing for this new government that to get this over and done with early in the term?
Well, I would say that anything he's going to do that he knows is going to be unpopular, or controversial, the time to do it is now. He has enormous political capital, but let's be frank about this. He's comfortably ahead in the polls. The opposition parties don't want an election, and his government's approval rating, even among Liberal and conservative and NDP voters, is reasonably high. It's 2/3. So to me, my belief is that whatever I think of the policies, a competent prime minister, if he has that kind of capital, spends it now. Because if he just waits, he's going to be overtaken by events. For example, the Canada-US-Mexico trade agreement that comes up for renegotiation as part of the deal next year. The federal government is already saying, let's get on that because that's going to be the real test. Remember that what Carney has said in defense of you put your elbows down, you didn't do what you said you would do, is we have the best deal of any country in the world. 85% of our products are tariff-free. And if you look at the average tariff across the entire Canadian economy, it's like 5.2% compared to most other countries at 15%. But that's all because of the deal that he had nothing to do with. That's the deal that Chrystia Freeland negotiated with, and Trudeau, the federal government, with Trump #1, who at the time thought that was a great deal and now thinks it's a terrible deal. So the real test is going to be, okay, you had this cover of the Canada-US agreement, but now that's all coming up. And there's also been reporting that what the Americans wanted was a grand bargain. In other words, far bigger than what's been talked about up to now. It'll be interesting to see what a grand bargain means. But the other thing we've heard from reporting is that there hasn't been serious talks between the Canadian and American delegations since late August. And yet Carney tells us that he has a great relationship with Trump, that they're texting back and forth, but then they're not doing printouts of what's the substance of that, which they normally do. They don't tell you everything that the two leaders discussed, but usually when a Canadian prime minister has a phone conversation, video conversation with another leader, you get something from the this is what they discussed. That's not happening. And that is, well, that's not very transparent, So we'll just I think with Carney, he's still he looks like a manager. He looks like a prime minister when he talks. He's clever in that he normally doesn't say something unless he has something to say, unlike his predecessor, who just couldn't resist telling us how wonderful he was compared to how evil we were. He doesn't do that. That's a plus. But I certainly still don't have a sense of him at his core. What are the things that he most believes in? As one example, is his primary concern getting the economy back on the rails, which I think is good. That's what we should be doing. Or is it his previous position as the world's leading corporate spokesperson he said the problem with carbon taxes when he was not the prime minister is that they were too low. So, and yet now we see statements that, well, we might have this ability to change. We're not going to have these hard targets if we can get.
He's a liberal, Lorrie. If you don't like his principles, hang on 5 minutes. He's got.
There you go. And
the real
that's
Mark Carney, please
exactly.
stand up.
Exactly. As usual, Lilley says in 5 words what it takes me.
Well, Brian, let's finish on this note and just sort of picking up on that. It was back to school, so to speak, for Parliament. They were back in the House, doing the people's business. It's supposed to be doing the people's business. How do you take away from Carney's performance on that, in light of the fact that we know it's going to be a bigger debt and deficit come this November 4th budget, in light of the fact that the spending remains high, in spite of the fact that inflation is going up again? How did Mark Carney look, so to speak?
I would give a passing grade to both Mark Carney and Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, the newly minted MP for Battle River Crowfoot. They both showed a different tone than we saw when it was Poilievre versus Trudeau. Of course, there had to be a different tone. They're not the same guys. And I thought they both handled things with humor. They're a bit more lighthearted. They're not as aggressive, but some of Carney's cabinet ministers are still as aggressive and dismissive of the opposition and legitimate questions as they were under Justin Trudeau. I wouldn't say the same for Carney, but for Frankie Bubbles and new cabinet minister Gregor Robertson. They asked something like 10 questions on food prices and food insecurity with the StatScan report and the Food Bank report coming out. And they asked 10 questions on it, and they would answer about tax cuts or housing or anything but. It was bizarre to watch. But Carney is handling himself better than I expected when he was first elected leader back in March, and then again prime minister in April. And Poilievre is found a good way to hold the government to account. He said, we're going to use the prime minister's own words and say, are you living up to this? And it's not overly combative, but it still holds the government to account. I think it's a good time.
Well, for those Liberals that are leaving, don't shed a tear for them. They're going off to nice, cushy appointments that we will all be paying for. Well, let us know what you think in the comments below. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And go to theTorontoSun.com. You'll find commentary and coverage there you will not find anywhere else.